Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Free Think Dojo. Halloween is upon us, folks. The time where everybody tries to scare the living shit out of each other and we all just go around acting like it's totally normal. But it's also the time when kids get to get free candy, dress up as their favorite character that they aspire to be one day. And it's a time that, as a kid, I wish I appreciated more, but definitely appreciate more as an adult. Growing up as a very anxious kid, I was always scared of everything. So I feel like all the monsters and the ghosts and all the stuff that came with Halloween were things that I usually avoided in my day to day life. I think it also attuned to the fact that I grew up with a lot of trauma revolved around Halloween. My grandparents used to pull a lot of pranks on me growing up that would always keep me on edge around that holiday time. And I always had a lot of run ins with haunted houses. I had a haunted house that I went to when I was about 8 or 9 that was being put on at my school, and I had to leave about 2 minutes in because I burst into tears. Around that age, I just didn't handle that stuff well. And with all of the things that I experienced, it just made it worse as I got older every single year. And eventually, in my teenage years, I tried to find ways to kind of expose myself to more haunted houses, more movies, in hopes that it would maybe toughen me up a little bit. And I'm not kidding. I would literally force myself to sit through an entire scary movie, to keep my eyes open, to deal with what is happening, and to just kind of face it head on. I kind of liked the adrenaline that came from it, even if I knew it was going to scare me late at night or affect me later on. And it was the same with haunted houses. I would go with groups of friends to make it a little bit easier, but also just try to get my mind to stray away from the idea that Halloween is scary and you should be scared of everything. And just find ways to kind of cope with that feeling and find the positives within it. At this point in my life, I realized that a lot of that was just me trying to understand why I was scared. But it also made me realize that fear itself is a tool that you can either utilize and control, or it will control you. So today in the dojo, I thought I would talk a little bit about how fear has always kind of enveloped my life through anxiety, through just being scared in general, and how I learned to kind of utilize it in a more positive and effective way to help me grow as a person. Now, you could definitely say I was a pansy or I was sensitive or whatever name you want to call me, and I would probably agree. There were some things growing up that I was scared of that, looking back now, I don't know why I was. Like simple things like using a urinal. I was always deathly afraid to use a urinal when I was a little kid just because of maybe stories I heard or just afraid of getting attacked. I can't really tell you. It was just all within my own head. As a kid, though, I don't give myself too much grief because I know as kids we're still trying to develop and we're still trying to understand these emotions we're feeling for the first time. But what annoyed me the most is a lot of that fear got in the way of things that, as a little kid, I was supposed to enjoy, but I couldn't. One Christmas, my grandparents got me a robot, and at the time I liked robots. I had no issue with them. I thought they were cool. I obviously, had the little kid affection that they usually do with toys, but I watched Chucky, if you ever heard of that movie, with the walking, killing doll, and ever since that point, I was afraid of anything that would move on its own. So when my grandparents whip out this moving, talking, robot that has all these cool guns and sounds, you would expect me to be very excited about it. But no, I was actually deathly afraid to the point where there are pictures of me today that my grandparents bring up all the time and make fun of me for, where I'm standing in a corner trying to avoid it like it's the plague. Nowadays, looking back, it's obviously a funny story. It's something my family loves. I have a guilty pleasure liking of it just because I think it's a funny thing. But I just kind of think back and realize that if I wasn't so scared as a kid, I might have actually enjoyed a lot more things. As a kid, though, I understand that we all were scared of something, and I don't really knock myself too much, obviously, because I was just a growing kid and, trying to learn about life. But as I got older, it started to translate more into anxiety and just normal fears, such as, getting jumped or going to college or trying to talk to a girl. But what I realized is that at some point, a switch went off in my head to where I realized that the fear that I was feeling was something that maybe I could use to my advantage. I grew up playing a lot of competitive sports, and during my time, I realized that I was a lot smaller than the other kids I was going up against. And pretty much every time I was playing competitive soccer or football or baseball, I always had another kid that was always trying to target me. They kind of saw me as the weak one because I was so small. Now, obviously, there wasn't much I could have done about that. I didn't really start lifting weights until I got into high school, and even then, I was just developing in general. So I tried to find ways to kind of play more of a mental game, to just try and get a little bit more of a competitive edge. So it was funny. I was actually trying to find a way to intimidate this really tall guy I was going up against in soccer. I was a defender and I was trying to avoid him running past me, kind of pushing me over. So I would actually kind of get these things called crazy eyes to the point where I would kind of wide open and stare at him. Now, it sounds kind of creepy because it was, but it worked. These crazy eyes I had, kind of staring him down, giving him a look, kind of having this posture about me. It kind of gave this new level of intimidation that was more of a tactic than anything. And at that point, I realized that even though I was small, I could kind of build my own presence up by doing different things to kind of fight back against my opponent. There were also other tactics I used, such as, saying some things to like throw them off or distract them, but also just finding ways to, kind of be scary in a sense. I used to huff like a lot of air when I was running and look really scary in pictures that my mom would take chasing down a ball. And it was little things like that that I realized that a lot of the fear I was feeling growing up and at the time, and a lot of that anxiety, I think I was actually trying to find a way to express that in a positive way. I was afraid of being small. I was afraid of being inferior during a competitive match. So I tried my best to use what I had and implement some intimidation tactics to get myself above. And that's when I realized that maybe I have something going here. As I mentioned in previous videos, I was bullied as a kid. And after I was bullied, I tried to find ways to kind of not get picked on anymore. And one way that I did that was kind of taking the stuff I learned in soccer and applying it, obviously, in a different way that would still have some type of intimidation. From bullying, I had a lot of fear. So I translated a lot of what I felt in soccer, trying to be competitive and try to get one up on someone else. And I started to kind of walk around school with like my chest up. And especially as I got bigger in high school and kind of exceeded puberty and started working out, I started to kind of feel like I could puff my chest a little bit more and be a little bit more of a presence as I was walking past others. At the time, I cared so much about how others perceived me. So I feel like it was a bit of a struggle because I knew I was on to something that was going to be positive, but I felt like I started to implement it in ways that, if I wasn't careful, could maybe, make me come off as a dick. But it wasn't until I started martial arts that I really started to understand the idea of utilizing your own fear. And what I started to find is that there was a lot of things I struggled with. I had a lot of self-esteem issues that I was trying to make up by being this different type of presence and trying to have a more intimidation factor about me. And it was like I was trying to make up for a lot of what I didn't have. But martial arts helped me with that. It taught me that I do have a lot to offer. But shutting myself down and turning to this kind of stone cold, resting bitch face type person to look scary is not going to benefit me in the long run. What would benefit me, though, is if I utilize my own strengths to intimidate people. And a lot of people are intimidated by people that are overly confident, people that have a lot of substance to them. So what I started to do was focus more on my own individual personality, my uniqueness, and try to express that through martial arts, be more friendly to people, and find ways to utilize the fear that I have and turn it into a tool to grow myself. Now, obviously, I can talk about another video about how martial arts can have, intimidation tactics thrown into there as well. But I've never been a proponent of how fear can be used as a power struggle. There's a lot of things going on in today's world where fear is used to manipulate people, to hurt people. And that's not what I'm about. Fear has always been something that I've learned from and tried to utilize in a more positive direction. Instead of giving in to fear and finding out that fear itself can dig you a deeper hole if you don't know how to balance it within your life. I think there's a time and place for fear to be implemented, and we can all display fear or experience it. But at the end of the day, I think everybody just needs to take what fear they have in their life and try to understand it. Try to look into why you're scared of something and probably just face it head on. All the fears that I've talked about, from urinals to robots to just self-esteem and fear of being who you are, I feel like it's more of a limiter than anything. But I don't for a second regret having those fears because it's helped me learn and develop to the person I am today, and I'm happy with the results so far. Let me know down in the comments how you guys have dealt with fear in your life and how you've used it as a tool yourself. I'm curious to see how other people have opinions on it because mine comes from just a very personal experience from anxiety, and I know a lot of people don't have the level of anxiety that I have. So definitely let me know down what your guys' experiences are, and hopefully we can connect on that. I promised and delivered on that video this week. I was trying to get a little Halloween type focus video out, so hopefully I landed on that. But once again, I appreciate every single one of you hanging out in the dojo with me today. Remember to subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends to grow the dojo, and I'll talk to you guys next time.